Hello.
Hello.
Wonderful to be with you today. So as I was driving here this morning, I pulled off of George Bush and I got onto 78 and this car, a GT something, pulled in front of me with all its noise and engine revving and stuff like that and tires spinning. And I'm in my humble old Ford Taurus. And I named my car, her name is JB. And I tapped the dashboard and I said, "Don't worry, honey, it's all noise. It's all bluster." And I thought at the moment, this is so perfect for the talk today. So last week we started talking about discipline. And Marilyn's phone went off at the perfect time and started playing Bad to the Bone. And so my talk segued into that we are bad to the bone when we remember what we are, that we have dominion and mastery. And so as I was thinking about that over the week, I thought, you know, a couple of years ago, I never would have said out loud that I have dominion and mastery. Because it sounds, depending on where you're coming from, egotistical. And it sounds like you're trying to be something that you're not. Or people say, you know, why should you say that? And for a while, I could not even say that I am divine. That I am God. Sometimes I have to say God in expression because it feels like I need to take it down a notch. But if we are to affirm truly what we are, then you are divine and you do have dominion and mastery, but we have to remember what that really means. Power has just gotten such a bad rap. We think of power as something that is hard-handed and heavy and aggressive and painful and manipulative, and it is anything but that. Power and dominion and mastery is an ability, it's a state of being. And we have dominion and mastery over our kingdom, not over the world and everybody else. We don't get to say what people do, and it's not about the noise, like the car that blasted by me for a block. And then my trusty little car passed him. And then I was reminded of the story, remember the hare and the tortoise?
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to be loud. That's not what we are. It's about the steady power, the under power that's there, the feeling of restraint when you don't have to react because you respond to life. That you don't have to have the knee-jerk reaction because you have dominion and mastery over who you are, over your world. And so if we're truly seeing ourselves as this divine being, then it matters what we think the divine being is, what we think God is. So everything is always in divine order. Sometimes we don't always recognize it as that. So this morning, the message from Richard Rohr's daily meditation was entitled, "Let God Be God." It says, it takes a long time for us to allow God to be who God really is. Our natural egocentricity wants to make God into who we want God to be. The role of prophets in good theology is to keep people free for God and to keep God free for people. If God is always mystery, then God is always in some way the unfamiliar, beyond what we're used to, beyond our comfort zone, beyond what we can explain or understand. The first commandment says that we're not supposed to make any graven images of God or worship them. At first glance, we may think this means only handmade likenesses of God, but it mostly refers to rigid images of God that we hold in our heads. God created human beings in God's own image, and we've returned the compliment, so to speak, by creating God in our image. Normally, we find it very difficult to let God be greater than our culture, our immediate needs, and our projections. The human ego wants to keep things firmly in its grasp. So we've created a God who fits into our small systems and our understanding of God. Thus, we've produced a God who requires expensive churches and robes, a God who likes to go to war just as much as we do, and a domineering God because we like to dominate. We've almost completely forgotten and ignored what Jesus revealed about the nature of the God he knew. If Jesus is, quote, the image of the invisible God, unquote, and then God is nothing like we expected. Jesus is in no sense a potentate or a patriarch, but the very opposite, one whom John the Baptist calls a lamb of a God. We seem to prefer a lion. So in the image of a lamb, there's gentleness and quietness, softness. So it's not about being like the lion, the predator. We don't have to be that. We don't have to be the noise and the bluster. So the power is something that's innate and is a state of being that enables you to go out and have dominion and mastery over your life. Just like the daily word today. So when we're thinking about discipline and the things we want to create for our experience, it matters what we think God is, because then that dictates what we are. So if God is domineering and judgmental, so are we. But if God is goodness and truth and light, we are that. And so let's not get mixed up in what the world thinks of dominion and mastery and power. That manipulative force that twists things to its own will. It's so much more than that. You know, it's that undergirding, that foundation, the thing that lifts you, not hammers you over the head. And it makes a difference if we're thinking about dominion and power over our world or over the world. So it's not like the Jim Carrey movie where he was decreeing that everybody won the lottery and caused chaos, or that he decided it should always be sunny and there's no rain, and then there were consequences to that. You know, it's our universe. It's who we are. It's our thoughts, our feelings, our intentions, our actions. All of that is in our hands. And so when we bring it down to everyday life and discipline and what it is we're trying to do on a daily basis, there really doesn't need to be a struggle, because all the things that we're used to crying and pleading to a God to and for, we already are. When we're pleading for peace, we are the peace. when we're pleading for goodness, we are the goodness. When we're pleading for calm, we are the calm. The decision is whether or not we show up as that in the moment. So that's the discipline we talked about last week. That's what we're talking about. In the moment, what happens? So do you stand up again in your dominion and mastery and say, I've got this. This is what I am. Or do we become something else and contract and hope that there's a God out there who's going to zap you and make it happen? And make you good when you don't feel like being good. Because I've seen it happen, and I've been that, in that moment. You know, please Lord, make it happen. And you're still doing the thing that you're saying in your head that you don't want to do. Right? The conflict between what we say we want and what we're about to do, what's right on the tip of our tongue, what's right at that moment of impact. We're getting ready to express something in the world. So there are a couple of tools that I discovered that kind of help when we're trying to embrace the divinity that we are. One of those, and I forgot her name, I didn't have time to look it up, but it's called the 5-second rule, and if you Google it, you'll find it. Mel Robbins. Count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You've got 5 seconds to whine, cry, be scared, have a tantrum, think all the things you're getting ready to blurt out of your mouth, and at 1, you do what you're supposed to do. Do what the divine self would do. And there's something that Mel Robbins says that happens in the counting down. Something happens in the brain that activates the body. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You gotta act. If you count the other way, you got more numbers. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I really just want to blast them. Right? And you can continue to procrastinate and be stuck in the almost doing. But the 5-second rule gives you time to kind of swirl and dance around in your humanity. But at 1, you pull that trigger and you do it. You be it. You are it. There's nothing to figure out. There's nothing to pray for. There is only to claim it. Embrace it. Remember it. So at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, there you are. You don't get any longer than 5 seconds. And at times I use that because I'm great at procrastinating. I'm great at sitting on the fence. Remember we talked about that last week, sitting on the fence. Get off of it and be what you're called to be, what you were created to be. The other one is I have a good friend who worked for Stephen Covey, and there's a quote that she reminds me of from time to time, and it's called, "You can say no. It's easy to say no when you have a greater yes." So sometimes we have to figure out why we want to be who we were created to be. Why do I want to be God in expression right now? So if I am going to fire off at my husband because I'm tired or I'm cranky, then I can fire off at him, maybe make myself feel good for a second. Or my greater yes is that our home is peaceful and loving and caring, and it's our sanctuary, and I always want to be that for him. That's my greater yes. And it makes me do something else with that thought that I'm getting ready to blast off at him. And so it may mean that I go somewhere and be quiet for a time, and then I come back when I can be the wife that I know I was created to be, the wife that he deserves, the wife that I deserve to be, the love and the light that I am. That's my greater yes. So I can say no to being snarky and nagging, which sometimes I can be, because I think that the counters should be clear right now. Right? But the counters don't matter. He matters more. Right? But sometimes I forget in my haste, in my need for perfection sometimes. Or I could have counted down and had my thoughts about my counters, what shouldn't be on them right now, in that corner right there. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Move it myself. Imagine that. Or go hug my husband and thank him for everything that he gives me on a daily basis, for the love and support and the goodness he brings into my life, right? Because the counters don't matter. Amen. So that's the dominion and mastery that we get to be, that we get to have over the world. And so it is dominion and mastery over our little world, but it affects his world too. And if I'm always showing up as less than what I was created to be, I actually affect the rest of the planet as well. Because I am not peaceful.
My son's been telling me that all week.
Right?
Yes.
We're affecting other people's
I'm
world.
around for a camera. I'm saying, who's following me?
Life gets real sometimes, doesn't it?
Yes, it sure does.
Yeah, we're bumping heads with each other. For what? We forget what we are. We forget that we have the power. We forget not that we have the power, but that we are the power. Metaphysics is unity spiritual philosophy, which means there's nothing out there to pray to. It is the energy, the force that is the world, and we are it. Created in the image and likeness. And so if we don't respond as this thing we need to create because we need something else to fix us or to fix what's going wrong, then we get to show up as divinity and expression. So what do we think about God? Because ultimately it is what we think of ourselves. Made in the image and likeness. So have we created a God that we need? With all of the things we think about ourselves, our self-esteem when it's not what it should be. When it's wrapped around all of the dysfunction from our childhood. Shelley and I were just talking about that earlier. You know, some of the pain and loss in our lives. And then we create a God that somehow is attached to that. And then we attach everything that we think we deserve or don't deserve to that. And that's not what we are. That's not what we were put here for. It really is this dominion and mastery, this power. So when you think about that, when you're in your meditation time, just let that feeling, that thought, wrap itself around you. Because it's hard to wrap your mind around it. Because one of the other things Richard Rohr says, that if it's a God that we can't understand, then maybe we've minimized it. It's so much bigger than that. And big doesn't even categorize it well. So when I'm in my prayer time and I think that I am the same power that created the heavens and the earth, the cosmos, the green grass, the trees that Shelley mentioned earlier, that she's grateful for, the things that make a tree go from what looks like it's dead in the winter to full and green and flowering in the spring. You are that. And it gives me goosebumps when I think about it. And I'm in my prayer time. And I think, oh my gosh. And so that does not make me feel aggressive and manipulative. If nothing else, it humbles me to the core. And I think, oh my goodness. Look at what's at my fingertips. Look what is my fingertips. Divinity. Every cell of your body is divine. Every hair on your head, or wherever else, or lack thereof. All right, hair on the arms.
On the back.
On the back, wherever they show up. As we get older, they show up in different places, right? There too. Oh my gosh. That too is God. Right? It's all perfection, and we are perfection. I have to remember, not perfectionist. I am perfection, divine perfection. Each of you is perfection. When I look in your eyes and you come in here on Sundays and on Thursdays, whenever we're together, I feel and see that perfection that you are. And you light up my world. And I know that you light up the world wherever you are when you're in it. Know that. Feel that. Be that. So let's take this into meditation.